Welcome to Economic Development and Equity. Today is March 26, 2022 at 10 a.m. I will be calling the meeting to order, but first I've called the meeting to order. Do I need a roll call or anything? No, okay. And then the county attorney is going to explain public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the public may speak to comment on any item, on any agendized item. The City Code requires speakers to present their comments in a respectful and courteous manner. Profane language, threats, or personal attacks on members of the public, the council members, committee members, or staff are not allowed. A person who violates these rules will lose the opportunity to continue to speak. The committee and staff cannot discuss or comment on matters relating to pending claims or litigation.
Thank you. I would like to introduce the interpreter.
Good morning, Madam Chair. My name is Carmen Cota. I will be providing interpretation for our Spanish-speaking audience. Let me introduce myself to our Spanish-speaking audience. Buenos días, soy Carmen Cota. Yo les estaré interpretando hoy día. Gracias. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Do I have any call to the public? I don't think I do. Thank you. I need item number 1 is approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a second.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Any
Aye.
discussion, I guess?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
I forget the discussion part. Oh, wait. I just realized I needed to do all the... Item 2.
Madam Chair, so on item 1, approval of the minutes, you did make that motion, it was seconded, and that one passed 4-0. And now we're going to consent items number 2 and number 3.
Yes, that's why I realized, because item 1 was part of consent, so that's where I got mixed up. So sorry, we're changing the way we roll today. Item 2 and 3 are for consent. May I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second?
Second.
And a second. Any discussion? Here, no discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any nays? Motion carries. Item number 4 is for information only. Does anybody want... It's about Home Investment Partnerships Program, American Rescue Plan, Funding Plan. Anybody want a report on that? Doesn't sound like it. Information only. Now we're moving to item 6. I am moving items out of order. We will be moving to Convention Sports and Leisure Market Study, and then after that, item 5 would be Government Property Lease Excise Tax Policy. Thank you. John Chan is here from the Phoenix Convention Center. He's the director. Jerry Harper is the deputy convention center director, and John Katz from CSL. Take it away.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. It's good to be back. And yes, I'd like to welcome Mr. Katz back. You may remember when he did his presentation to the subcommittee in 2020. So just by way of a little background, in 2019, the City Council directed staff to undertake a market feasibility study for the Phoenix Convention Center to analyze the convention market in Phoenix, including the city's infrastructure, assets, and competitiveness. So as I indicated, Mr. Katz presented his initial findings and recommendations to the subcommittee in January of 2020, but that was shortly before the pandemic began to impact the entire meetings and visitor industry. And given the impacts of the pandemic over the past 2 years, we recently re-engaged Mr. Katz and his firm of CSL to update the study, assess the impact of the pandemic on convention business, to take a look at what the outlook for the meetings industry is, future convention center expansion needs, hotel inventory, and hospitality amenities. So with that, I will turn the presentation over to Mr. Kotz.
Thank you, John. Indeed, a lot has happened in the last couple of years, so I think it is wise that we go back and take a look at what's happened to the convention industry in terms of its demand and where the attendees and the exhibitors are at, but also in terms of how buildings are responding, and does that inform anything we should be considering here in Phoenix? One of the areas we focused on was certainly the COVID impacts, and looking at what I think are sticky or lingering impacts that we may want to consider longer term versus those that are going to fade away as the pandemic recedes. Convention industry trends in general, we're looking at the competitive assessment. Your competition is definitely not standing still, looking at their investments. We'll talk about the future expansion needs of the convention center itself, hotel needs, and then just planning for the entire district. So jumping right in, looking at room nights, and this is obviously a critically important factor. Convention centers are designed in part to bring people from out of town and generate room nights. And as you can see, prior to the pandemic, for the last 5 years, we were over 300,000 room nights generated from events at the convention center. Pandemic hits, obviously, 2021. What we're looking for, and this is really interesting to me, is we hit 316,000 room nights in 2022. We're on track to hit over 300,000 room nights in 23, 24, and we haven't finished booking in those years yet. So what we've seen is a pretty strong rebound in the room night and economic impact generating capacity of the convention center. And I'm traveling all over the country all the time, and I'm seeing this in a lot of markets where the pent-up demand to get back and see people face-to-face is very strong. We look at industry trends. This is kind of an academic slide to some degree, but it tracks U.S. gross domestic product changes in blue and various measures of the convention industry in red. And you can see the linkage there. We've had recessions, we've had dot-com busts, we've had 9/11, hurricanes, the Great Recession, and the pandemic. And every time we hit one of these skids, we see the convention industry decrease. The pandemic is obviously the most dramatic element of that. We saw a 79% decrease in 2020. But we also saw a tremendous rebound in 2021 and 2022. I'm stunned at the resiliency of the industry coming back from the pandemic, and now we're starting to see again these events start to grow, and the attendance is starting to come back as we move forward. So I'm not worried about a lingering effect of that, so to speak. And I've kind of covered this slide just in my previous comments. The competition, we knew this in 2020, and it has not slowed down. As a matter of fact, many markets have taken the COVID break to continue their planning and investment efforts in the convention industry. Dallas has now funded a $2 billion project to tear down their convention center and build a brand new convention center, along with several major hotels and entertainment development. Seattle will be opening very, very soon, a $1.9 billion investment in a new convention center, but they kept the old one. So now they've got two that are about a block away, and they're running those in parallel. New Orleans is investing in their convention center as we speak. Colorado's about ready to open a new ballroom plus pre-function area and this beautiful outdoor terrace space. San Diego, Los Angeles, Orange County, slightly different story. They've been talking about projects there for many, many years. They're not quite at the funding stage, but they are aggressively pushing to invest in their convention package. And Las Vegas, kind of the crown jewel of the convention industry in some respects, has just opened a $1 billion, 1.4 million square foot venue. And I can tell you, even since we prepared this presentation, Salt Lake City is now launching a study process to reinvent the West Hall of their convention center as they attract outdoor retailers, which is a massive trade show event. Look at just kind of the rankings of the exhibit space and the sellable space. Sellable space includes exhibit, meeting, and ballroom space. And if I lump all that together, you're at 860,000 square feet, about 14th amongst the competitive set that we looked at. If we were to invest in the kind of project we'll talk to you about here in a moment, that would raise your profile to around 913,000 square feet. So you're not a market leader. You're kind of in the middle of the pack these days, and Phoenix has an opportunity if we make the right ancillary investments to increase its ranking in total sellable space. And as you see on the slide, to do that, those ancillary investments would include a headquarter hotel and then creating a district around the convention center that is entertainment oriented for your visitor base. I look at the hotel rooms, and we have a challenge there. We've talked to meeting planners, we've talked to John and Ron at the Convention Bureau and Jerry, and looking at all of the demand profiles, and our 3,659 rooms within a half a mile isn't enough to allow us to move up in terms of convention profile nationally. So we would need, in this case, we've assumed 1,200 new rooms, and ideally they're in a large single box, as large as we can possibly get, and that would increase our profile to about 4,800 rooms. Still, we need to continue to develop that, and what we would see happening if we create this profile where we've done a convention center, a hotel in a district, you're going to see the private sector continue to infill with additional hotel rooms. And I'll talk about this later. There's 3,000 hotel rooms in the pipeline in Nashville directly attributed to their convention center investment. So I think that number, if we take the initiative to invest in that headquarter hotel, would continue to move up the ladder. We talked about trends in the industry, and I think this is really, really important. Is there anything that's happened in the last 2 years that we want to make sure we're staying on top of and putting into our convention center? So unique and authentic food and beverage, as an example. Well, you guys have kind of done that. Signature outdoor space. You have your Canyon on 3rd project. In-person hybrid events. We're keeping an eye on that, and as we all go to conventions, are there some of us that would rather stay home and participate virtually? We're tracking that to see if the convention center needs to create space to allow for that. Engaging pre-function areas. We could see long-term, as part of the investments, that we create more of a village atmosphere, a comfortable atmosphere within the convention center. So some of the trends are going to be sticky. I think we need to invest in those long-term. And as I say, some of them, as you can see here, you're already jumping on with the brew pub, and the Canyon on 3rd is a fantastic outdoor event space. So well done on that. We talk about where we might do this. This is a real estate question, and I've always said this as we do projects all across the country, indeed around the world. There's only certain pieces of real estate that can accommodate a convention center expansion. It's hard to do a convention center project the other side of downtown. It has to be contiguous to what you're doing today, and this is the only parcel you can see to the south building, that would eventually allow for an expansion of the convention center. So we are looking at that and kind of talking about the sizing of what you might want to do. You have 190,000 square feet at the upper level. If we could add 150 to that, you'd have a 340,000 square foot space at the upper level of the convention center, married to your 315,000 square feet of space downstairs. So you'd have basically multiple event capacity within the same building, and that would have to be on that site if you're going to progress in the convention industry long term. And then you can see the loading docks and the support space that would also accommodate that. So this is a very, very crude or rough representation of what the expansion might look like, and the message and the key takeaway is this is the only site. There is no other site in downtown that you could do this project on for investing in the convention industry. If I look beyond the building, this is really important to us because the convention planner is looking to buy the city. They don't really buy the convention center. They buy the building, they buy the district, and they buy the destination. So when we talk about that, we need to make sure we are investing in the experience of the attendee when they're walking between the hotels and restaurants and the convention center. You see in many markets they're creating pedestrian placemaking, creating pocket parks, seating areas, shade structures, which are particularly important here, street performances. San Antonio does a masterful job of creating the environment around the building that has that entertainment flavor. Wayfinding, people coming from all over the world need to know where they're going, and there's elements of public art and just basic signage and electronic signage that are important. We have nighttime activations, so this becomes more of that 20-hour-a-day experience. You can see these even in cold Minneapolis, or Chicago, they've got outdoor nighttime activations. Vice Mayor, I see if you have a question, or?
No, I was going to correct you because that's Chicago.
Yeah, Chicago's upper left, yeah.
Chicago.
Yeah, exactly. And Minneapolis is the bottom two. And technology, in terms of the wayfinding and transportation, we're just in a couple of markets where they're starting to talk about autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, doing a very simple route to move people to the entertainment districts. So that kind of investment we think is really important. So John asked me to talk about a case study. How on earth is Nashville going from 1991, where Butch Spearden, the bureau director, literally had to face a situation where the best pizza in downtown Nashville voted was Pizza Hut, and the best seafood was Red Lobster. Compare that to today, and how did they get there? And it started in the early 90s with residential, bringing more people to town. They opened up a new NHL arena, and then they changed zoning laws to allow that kind of residential and other development to take place in those key areas. Suddenly you see a new NFL stadium, and the crazy thing is they just approved a brand new NFL stadium, so that one will be going away. They'll be getting a new one. Symphony Center, then in 2013 and 14 we had the 800-room Omni Hotel. We had the Music City Center, their large convention center, and we had the Country Music Hall of Fame all opening, and then the Riverfront Amphitheater. They benefit by having certain things that you also have. They've got university presence. They have a massive industry. In their case, it's healthcare industry. They continue to drive that. They spend a lot of money marketing the destination. So they're a 30-year overnight success story that's led to, since 2014 when the convention center opened, about 2,500 new hotel rooms with about 3,000 more in the pipeline. So it is, we talk about our ranking of hotels, we're a little behind. If we're pushing the needle in terms of investing in our convention and visitor industry, the private sector will follow with investments in those hotels. Summarizing 1, 2, and 3, the future convention center needs are, as we talked about, 150,000 square foot hall that connects to your existing space. And that could be a project that takes place within the next 6 to 10 years. When I say 6 to 10 years, keep in mind, when we talk about pre-planning, financing, approvals, design, construction, pre-opening, you could almost start today and try to hit that 6-year window. So when we talk about a 6 to 10 years, it doesn't mean let's sit around for 6 to 10 years. It means that's where we want this thing to open. To partner with that, in order for it to be successful, I'll caution that we need a new headquarter hotel. So that would have to be part of this. And then just as important as any of those two, we need to make sure that the district around the convention center is amenable to the visitor industry. And not just the visitor industry, because if we invest in those kind of assets, it becomes an amazing quality of life experience for an increasing downtown resident base, the increasing worker base. It's a partnership between catering to your visitors and catering to the residents of Phoenix in that district environment, as we saw earlier. So those are the 3 big takeaways. John, I suppose we could open it up for questions if that makes sense.
Sure. Thank you, John, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. We're happy to take questions, but I also want to introduce Ron Price, who is the President and CEO of Visit Phoenix. He's here in the audience today, so all of us, including Ron, would be happy to take questions and answer any questions.
Councilwoman Stark.
Thank you. So on your findings, number 2, when you talk about increased inventory of convention hotel rooms, how close do those hotels have to be to really make it usable, functional? Have you ever done that kind of study?
Absolutely. So the convention planner, probably been to conventions, they're going to want a single large hotel across the street from the convention center of at least 800 rooms. Ideally, it's 1,000 rooms. Once you achieve that, now you've got the Sheraton and a couple others, then we can start to see smaller hotels, 150, 225, and they can sprinkle within a half mile of the convention center. But everything hinges on that large box headquarter hotel.
And then also, have you had an opportunity to look at how we might be able to partner with the Suns and the D-backs and perhaps use their facilities to try to attract bigger conventions?
Yeah, that is an opportunity for the large attended events, educational conferences. They can use those arena spaces. I would suggest that once you move forward and look at the notion of a district and building almost a campus that encompasses all of those venues and the restaurants, that's probably an opportune time to study in detail how those venues, by virtue of their spaces and the millions of people they draw, how they could interact with the convention center. But safe to say, it's once every several years you bring in an educational conference that has so many people they want to use an arena for seating events. That does happen on occasion.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm curious about the different structures. And I don't think we probably have that today, so it'd be very curious to look at the different type of structuring with a public-private partnership, with a public, what that looks like. I'm very curious to see that. I know this is probably one of our #1 assets in the city. And as this group sits here, we're going to make some choices on how we're going to leverage our asset. And I want to be able to have the knowledge and I think I'm where I need to be, but I just need evidence, to then be able to say, okay, this is how we're going to leverage this space and this property.
Yeah.
One of the
Madam Chair, that's a great point, and I think that's something that we can look at in the future. Certainly, Mr. Kotz, in his experience as a consultant, has worked with a lot of cities and advised them on how to structure deals. Ron, in his previous experience, has a lot of working between the community and private sector on how to put together and structure hospitality investments.
Yeah, and I would say in the notion of public-private partnership is right on target for this particular site and this project. And you own the land, so you have a tremendous amount of power in that public-private relationship. So we would help you leverage that.
We need the right partner, though.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But my question about that is because I watched Nashville in their phases and how their first phase when they started to invest in that area, the downtown area. I guess it's the downtown area. I don't know where the convention. And they started to invest. What I loved about Nashville was that the fact that they were able to preserve historic buildings and blend in very modern buildings within its space. And you could see the different architecture, you could see what's new. And some of them you couldn't really, unless you knew architecture, you knew, okay, that one is new. But it blended in so well that you would question. And I would like to, I'm just talking, to see that, I'm just putting it on the record, to see some of that when we're looking and identifying as we grow towards the future. The other piece about Nashville was that that phase happened, and the great restaurants, great authentic restaurants came in, but you also had still your soul food restaurants kind of like on the outskirts, but were connected that you could be able to walk to that space and then go back to the convention center. The element about that, though, is that there was so much diversity within that space. There was the country music. You could go down now those 2 rows or those 2 streets. Mm-hmm. Then you were able then to jump to another area where you could have some of the soul food, get some of the feeling of that area. Then you were able to walk to an LGBTQ space and area where you could experience all the different dances, drag queens, whatever you were wanting to do, you were able to have that. But then when I said, wait a minute, I know there's Hispanics in this area, where's the Hispanic area? I discovered it and was able to go into the space of like, oh, I feel like I'm at home. I don't feel we're there yet in the diversity space. And I think that's key to any city, because you can feel that in Washington too, in Washington, D.C. But before I go there, and then they built the Omni. And that Omni, because I was there for education conference. I was there, and I was just amazed at the feeling that I had that I could cross the street to the Omni, go to the local restaurants on the floor, then be able then to shut down. They shut down, actually, that street. And we were able then to have events or just kind of stand in the middle of the street, and then they, at night, they had their little bikes and everything going on. But it was a great feeling of connectivity.
Right.
Washington, D.C. is a different element because you're across the street from the Marquise. However, they did a really great job on how you connected. Even though you have to walk out the convention center, there's a connectivity of the marquise. But I'm going to the fact that then little boutique hotels started to pop up all the way around the convention center because the marquise would get full, and then where do you go? Yep. So there is that element, like you were talking about it, but I actually felt it. For me, it's about feeling and touching. How DC was able then to do that. And be able then to see it and jump around, I guess, around in the convention area space where you can say, okay, I don't want this type of room, I want this type of room. But that is what I'm saying, I'm validating your point.
Yeah, well, you're an amazing example of a visitor to a market looking for unique, authentic, and diverse. And that's really what we want to see. I don't want to go to another city and see what I can get at home. And when you do the district planning, you're looking at exactly that. What's unique and authentic and diverse about Phoenix? And then how do we connect to neighborhoods? Because some of the neighborhoods offer the most amazing experiences for the visitor. How do we connect those all together? So you're a perfect example of what we're working towards in terms of creating that desirable place for a visitor and for residents as well.
Yeah, because I was thinking, as you were talking about the convention center, I was thinking, okay, as a native, where would I go? Well, as a native, where I go to Roosevelt Row. I love Roosevelt Row because it also kind of reminds me of Miami, in that we don't have a beach, but you know, that space and arena, and there's diversity there in food and everything else. So that I was thinking, okay, if I was staying here, would I walk to Roosevelt Row? Well, I would walk. I like to walk the cities, but I would walk because that's where the entertainment is. So it'd be very interesting, the connectivity that happens, but then what also gets then built in the downtown area, because then there's connectivity in the downtown area, and then if you want to pop out, you can pop out of the area and go to another space. But Roosevelt Row for me is a prime example of what I would like to see then be built within the entertainment district of the downtown. We have the arts. I mean, the arts are here. We have those pieces here. We just now need to lift and elevate.
Agreed.
Okay, so I'm
right
just
on target.
just wondering.
Yeah, no, you're right on target.
I'm just asking.
Chairwoman?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I actually just wanted to really echo those points. I think the most compelling piece of the presentation that stood out to me in terms of what we're still missing is that the language you had around 24/7 walkability and activity. I feel, just as was mentioned, I think Roosevelt Row is the part of our downtown that is, vibrant, has the diversity, has so many amazing restaurants and bars, and things are open late. And I still feel there's a bit of a disconnect from like the main downtown core where the convention center is to that area. To that end, there have been some ongoing discussions with the District 8 office, since we share Roosevelt Row and downtown in general, and Downtown Phoenix Inc., about how we could go about funding a downtown circulator bus that would be, just downtown focused around the clock. And so I think that should be a big, it seems like an easier and faster piece that we could work on over the next 6 months. And I think it would be, I think we just need more connectivity between where the convention center is, those hotels, and then the really attractive pieces nearby, whether it's Roosevelt Row, even Grand Avenue. I mean, there's a lot of fun, diverse, cool spaces very close by, but we just need easier modes of helping to get folks there. So that's a little bit of my comments there. And then I'm also just curious in terms of the hotels that we are still missing, if there's any updates anyone presenting can share on like where we are at with, securing more of those large scale hotels that we need.
Yeah, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, and first off, just to echo what Councilwoman Ansari was mentioning with the circulators, we sell with Visit Phoenix. We're the primary sales agent as well as the marketer for tourism. And our main priority is filling that convention center and filling downtown. And as we look at how we sell downtown, Roosevelt Row is an incredible asset. Now we start talking about how do we move people from the convention center to Roosevelt Row, because that's what a lot of our visitors are reading about and want to go see. So that's going to be, I think, a very important topic is how do we move people around the city and downtown especially. In the hotel space, as we talk about the type of hotels we need downtown, Mr. Kotz spoke very well about what we need. So we do need another large box hotel. 800, 1,000 rooms is the priority. When we start looking at the business that wants to come here, because we are a growing city, we're very popular, one thing that we're lacking is another large hotel. In fact, we have some great examples of some big groups that are wanting to come to Phoenix to host their convention, and we're now placing them out to 15 to 16 different hotels. So you can imagine if you're going to a conference on your own, and the large body of that conference is staying in one of the large hotels, and you're pushed out to one of the other 14, 15 hotels. It makes it difficult for us. So I will tell you this, coming from my past where I worked with Marriott as well as on the development side and still have a lot of friends on the hotel development side, there's a lot of interest in Phoenix and downtown Phoenix to place a hotel, a convention hotel. So I think what we are looking at is what is that next opportunity as we look at this land is the most valuable land we have downtown. What is that master plan? What's that vision for it? And I think once we understand that and working with our great partners at the city, we can start engaging in more deeper conversations with some of our great hotel operators.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. I just lost my paper. That was Ron Price speaking. And from...
Phoenix.
Is it Phoenix, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I get all my acronyms and everything wrong. And I actually, to Councilwoman Ansari, is the circulator. That is a topic of conversation. I was approached on that, of the circulator and connectivity. I asked the cost. It's pretty costly per month. But I also pushed back and said, well, we have all our downtown advocates and see which companies would be willing to sponsor a month to run the circulator for a year. So those conversations are happening. We'll just have to get really creative on how we're going to fund it. So there's many ways that we can figure this out.
I think, Vice Mayor, that's from a visitor standpoint. When you think about other destinations that you go to, like Nashville or San Antonio or San Diego, you can walk a half a mile or 3/4 mile and not give it a second thought. But walking a half a mile in downtown Phoenix feels a lot farther, and a lot of that is just the walkability and the heat and things like that. So we need to look at other avenues to make that connector more easy and convenient for the visitor.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? John, what would you like us to do?
Vice Mayor, this item is posted for discussion and possible action. On the last slide, there were 3 components that Mr. Kotz listed in the slide. Thank you. So the first items 1 and 2, the convention center expansion, the additional hotel rooms. I think as we sit here today, these are not immediate action steps to take today per se, but these are more intended to serve as a benchmark and to guide and prioritize the future planning and development and growth of the city's convention and visitor industry. Item 3, the entertainment district planning effort, is more of a near-term recommendation that Mr. Kotz is recommending that the city should initiate as an immediate next step. And that is something that we would want to make sure that we bring in, experts that have national experience in developing and building out these entertainment districts and figuring out how to best make it work for Phoenix. So item 3 is more of an immediate.
You would like a motion what I'm hearing is you would like a motion to proceed ahead for the entertainment district planning effort.
Correct. And then
And be able to, I'm just going to see if I'm correct, and be able to hire those that are needed to help in the assistance of the entertainment district planning.
correct. So we would work with
Okay.
CED and Visit Phoenix
Okay.
and Downtown Phoenix Inc. on kind of going through a process to select a consulting firm to kind of help us with that process. And then also on items 1 and 2, if it's the subcommittee's pleasure to adopt those recommendations, again, as a benchmark for planning purposes and for the future.
I would like to bring items 1 and 2 back in January. I think there's a series how we're doing it, so. But what would you like, John? Or can we not rank them? Can we just go 3 would be the first one?
Correct.
Future
and then-
PCC facility would be number 2, and then 3 would be increase the inventory as you're moving. You guys know what you're doing, so tell me what you want.
Item 3 is more immediate, so I think that would be the immediate recommendation to move forward on a process
Okay.
to initiate an entertainment district. And then 1 and 2 are just more adopting those recommendations as a baseline for the future.
All right. Can I have a motion to adopt, moving forward, the entertainment district planning and also 1 and 2 for our
As a benchmark for
As a
future
benchmark,
planning,
yeah.
yes.
I'm going to defer to Councilwoman Ansari since it's her district.
Oh, that's even better. Councilwoman Ansari, would you like to make a motion?
Yes. Motion to approve.
Second? Do I have a second? Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Nays? Vote. All those in favor say
Aye.
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 The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Moving ahead. Thank you. Item 5, Government Property Lease Excise Tax Program.
Vice Mayor, here at the table with us today is our Community and Economic Development Director, Ms. Chris Mackey, and then Zandon Keening, who is Deputy Community and Economic Development Director. Chris?
Thank you, Ginger. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. We are here today to talk to you about the conversations we've had and the documentation that we have done with the council offices and with others regarding our program known as Government Property Lease Excise Tax, or GPLET, as you know it called. This information today is just for information and discussion only, and not for any action. As Ms. Spencer said today with me is Zandon Keating, Deputy Director over Community Development, and Zandon's going to walk us through the history of GPLET, what it is. Although we know you know what it is, but for those watching on the camera know what it is, and then talk about the conversations that we've had in our interviews and some potential recommendations coming forward. Zandon?
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. So GPLET, what is it? So this is a program that was authorized by the state of Arizona back in 1996. It really is intended to address government-owned property because, as we know, or private use on government-owned property. As we know that government property, owned property is not subject to property tax, and so this is really a way to address those private uses that are leased onto government-owned property. The GPLET creates an excise tax, which is really a substitute to those property taxes. Without this program, when we have a private use that is operating on government-owned lands, the tax would end up being zero. So this is really a way to make sure that those property or those businesses and those really properties are paying their fair share. Those private entities are paying their fair share of taxes to the various government entities. So there have been a number of changes throughout the years. Of course, in 1996, the program was authorized. Then in 2010, there was a modification, a big modification. It limited the potential lease terms to 25 years, and that included an 8-year abatement at the beginning of each lease term. Then in 2017, there was an additional modification, and that modification only gave the option of an 8-year abatement or the 25-year lease term. So if a developer chose the 8-year abatement, they would not be eligible for any lease term beyond those 8 years. So what do we use it for? There are really two ways that the city uses or we implement the GPLET program across our various properties. The first one is to tax non-government uses on government properties. There are quite a few of these across the city. The best example is really the aviation department. They have quite a few private uses on airport land, and this is a way to make sure that those uses are paying their fair share of taxes to the government entities. The other is as an economic development tool or redevelopment tool. It really helps facilitate revitalization in certain parts of our city because there are certain places and uses where you see a little bit of a reduction or through the abatement of the excise tax that can help incentivize certain uses that the city's interested in seeing in a particular area. And that brings us to the Central Business District. So the Central Business District is where there's the greatest benefit of the GPLET program. So if a property is located in both a redevelopment area and the Central Business District, they can qualify for abatement, which is probably the greatest benefit of the program to a developer, to a private entity. The Central Business District is in Phoenix, is generally what we think of as the traditional downtown boundaries, 7 to 7, Jackson or so north to McDowell, but it also includes the Capitol Mall area going west. Much of that area is also within the downtown redevelopment area.
Brandon, I have a question.
Yes.
How many redevelopment areas can you have?
The number you can have is unlimited by state law. The city has a number of them throughout the city currently, but there's no limit. It's just based on does an area qualify. There's some criteria in state laws that an area has to be identified as a certain percentage of properties have to have slum or blight elements on the property, and once that area goes through a certain process and can be designated as a redevelopment area, and then you now institute a new redevelopment area. But there's no limit by state law.
Madam Chair, if I could provide one point to that, though, I think maybe where you're going, a city can only have one central business district. So to receive the abatement, it has to be in the redevelopment area, which are a limitless number the city could have. But to receive the abatement, it also has to overlay a central business district, and there can only be one in a central business district. And that area for this, right now we're 1.6 square miles. That area can be as great as 12 square miles because of the size of the city at 517 square miles. So it can be 20% the size of the city.
Okay, and the Central Business District is located where?
It is here in downtown Phoenix. It's generally bounded by, it's Grant Street on the south, just south of McDowell on the north, and really between the sevens.
Okay, and so if we want to change the Central Business District and move around the city to create a Central Business District, how would we do that?
Madam Chair, that would be for us to do a study and the council to look at. It's typically a place where your government capital is located. It's typically a place where your banks and industries as such are located. But there's no perfunctory, it has to be these things. So that'd be something for the council to take a look at what they wanted to do. We are, later in this presentation, going to walk you through the benefits in the other redevelopment areas that could be nearly as great for those areas.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So the other requirements in order to qualify for a GPLET within the central business district and a redevelopment area, a project must improve the value of a property by 100%. We are required to notify all taxing jurisdictions within that area at least 60 days prior to council consideration for the GPLET. Of course, all GPLETs do require or subject to city council approval. And then, as I noted, within the central business district is where you can do that 8-year abatement, or we can do a 25-year excise tax with no abatement. The abatement is only available within the central business district. Now I'm going to pass it back to Chris, who's going to first start talking about some of the changing market forces in downtown in the central business district.
Madam Chair, as we look at downtown, I thought it was really interesting, the previous presentation from Convention Sports and Leisure, where on this slide where they talked about Nashville. And they said the most important thing in getting Nashville moving forward to the level it is today with its honky-tonks and its country music. And Vice Mayor, I thought it was so interesting the way you described those different districts, because I was in my head thinking of Phoenix and how those different districts would apply and how they would work. So I think that as we look forward, you'll notice in that 1991, they talked about their most important thing was getting people to live in downtown Phoenix. And you'll recall, because you were all on the council at the time, your direction to staff in 2013, 2014 was to get people living in downtown Phoenix again. So you were really a thought leader even before your time. And that's how we leveraged the GPLET tool in downtown Phoenix. Where we've really focused it was getting people living in downtown Phoenix again. And that tool has served us very, very well. We've seen, thousands of residential rooms and thousands of new people live in downtown Phoenix. And we always talk to you about the fact that rents did not support construction costs. And you would ask us, when will we know that we've used the GPLET tool to our satisfaction? In pure residential high-rise buildings, the rent has now reached the level that they support construction costs. And we've seen a number of those projects build over the last 3 years without using the GPLET tool. So as we look at that changing market focus, your guidance to us in 2013 and 14 was to get people living down here, which we've done. And the people are still continuing to build residential without the GPLET. That pure residential focus can do it on its own now. So, you don't want a policy that says never again, because there's always an exception to never again. But as you look at it and we think about the central business district and how that's changed, you have caused this to become a very vibrant supporting area. When we look at, Vice Mayor, you made such a good point a moment ago, is how do we move that so we can leverage that tool to cause redevelopment in other areas? There is a second side of the GPLET tool, which is the economic development program in a non-central business district. So not in the 1.6 square miles, but in the other 515 square miles that we have around the city. We do have 19 redevelopment areas within the city of Phoenix currently, and 18 of which are outside the central business district. In that term, we can't use the abatement of the GPLET for an 8-year period of time, but instead, for up to 25 years, the properties could go on an excise tax. So instead of full ad valorem property tax, they pay an excise tax based on the square footage of that particular discipline. As an example, outside the central business district, if you're residential, right now you're paying 94 cents a square foot for your excise tax in lieu of the property tax. Now that is subject to producer price index on an annual basis, so it goes up by producer price index on an annual basis, and it can never go back down again once it's gone up. That is a tool, and if you're in a redevelopment area, you can experience a 20% reduction on that excise tax for of 10-year period of time. So instead of 94 cents, you'd take off 19 cents. 9 and 9 is 18, and then that half on that side. So you would have a 19 cents reduction on that for a 10-year period of time. Where this really can benefit is particularly in the conversation that council has been having regarding that workforce housing, the missing middle, finding those locations where redevelopment can take place and bring more workforce housing units that allow others to come in on that front. So abatement, again, is not an option. It does cause an excise tax to be immediate, but it can last for as long as 25 years. And Vice Mayor, you asked us such a good question earlier where you asked the limit of the redevelopment areas. There is not a limit of redevelopment areas. And you'll see by the map in front of you, most of the redevelopment areas that the city or development has caused to happen tend to be south of I-10. There's very few north. You have Longview, you have Isaac, you have West Minnesota, and you have the North Mountain redevelopment area. When we look at the council districts west of I-17 and north of I-10, some of the very much older areas of the city, staff could, at council's direction, look at particular areas of the city, have an engineering firm conduct a survey, which is what they do, and then come forward with a recommendation to city council to create more redevelopment areas, which also bring additional federal tools along with them. When we look at our area median income, when we talk about workforce housing, when we talk about the things that this tool could help create that's of interest to the city council, affordable housing, which our housing department works on, tends to be led by government. It is handled by nonprofits. It is a tool that's guided by tax credits, by low-income tax credits, and it's generally 80% or below of the area median income, with the city's greatest need at this time 60% or below of the area median income. Most nonprofits and governments that build affordable housing don't pay property tax. They're already excluded from paying property tax. So the GPLET really doesn't benefit affordable housing in most instances. In some it might, but in most instances it does not. And when we look at, so we go to the next category, which is workforce housing. Workforce housing is 80 to 120% of the area median income, and it is restricted through contract to never exceed those levels as long as the tool is in place. We have that in place in a number of our GPLETs in downtown Phoenix, and we govern those through audits of their accounting system to make sure that for them that percentage meets the guideline. If they do not, they get a time to cure. If they don't cure, our contracts do allow us to immediately terminate the GPLET and move them onto full ad valorem property tax. And then finally, we have market rate. And when we talk about market rate, that is whatever the market will bear for residential housing. We see that in the news quite frequently today. The market rate has gone up astronomically and salaries have not followed. Council did give staff in 2020 direction to look at a government property lease excise tax, to really look at modifying the policy, in looking at what council wanted to leverage this tool to cause to happen in areas of the city. So we did our interviews. We've conducted interviews with the council, and we want to thank you all for providing us that guidance and input. And what we took from our interviews with council was, what was important to council was to create a menu of options, not a one-size-fits-all for how this tool would be used, but have a menu of options available for consideration. The other thing we took away from you is there would be different considerations for a program that would be in the central business district where an abatement could be considered, and different considerations for the other redevelopment areas where we would like to cause some of the great things we've seen happen in downtown Phoenix happen in other redevelopment areas of the city. So basically you would have two programs, one for the central business district downtown and one for the 18 other redevelopment areas. They'd be very similar, but you'd have two programs for council's consideration.
Chris, could you please, I understand that, but that will get very confusing with developers and those that are going to be applying for this. So I need a little bit more clarity.
Madam Chair.
And what would the central district considerations be versus the 18 other?
Madam Chair, that is what we're here today to discuss with you. But as an example, one of the things that staff thought about an additional consideration would be, since this area gets an abatement of property tax, they don't pay any property tax for the 8-year period of time, their contribution to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund or to some other public benefit that council would want to cause to happen might be a little bit greater than it is in another area of the city where redevelopment is happening. So maybe they contribute 200% of an amount to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and other areas might contribute 150% to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund or other fund that the council wants to have happen. So it just would be a larger financial contribution if you're in the central business district, because they achieve a greater return.
Go ahead.
So just as a follow-up, for example, if we were looking at a GPLET for, let's say, a grocery store in an area where there's food desert, how would that work as far as affordable housing? Would that be a different consideration when you talk about different considerations? So would we say, yeah, we should look at a GPLET because they're actually serving a need in an area that's desperate for some healthy food?
Madam Chair, Councilman Stark, a great segue into how to discuss that. Absolutely. So in that instance, they might not make a contribution to an affordable housing trust fund, but they might make a contribution to an open space or trees that line the sidewalk from the residential that would be walking to the grocery store, so that the individuals could have a shaded, comfortable walk in getting to the grocery store. So they might, the council of the district, the city council might say, you know what we'd like in this instance is a shaded bus structure in front of the grocery store, so people that are coming have shade to be in. But instead of asking the grocery store to do that improvement, they'd make a financial contribution to a redevelopment fund, much like they do today in downtown Phoenix, and we bring forward to the council for your consideration as to how you'd like to use that in this particular area.
So it really is options depending on what the potential use might be?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
The trick to that, and you and I are experiencing this right now, the trick to that, then it's scattered and it's one-offs. And I'm using an example right now of development. And developers will come in and say, I'm just going to use, I want to activate this space. And what they'll do is go through the options of lists, and whatever is the best and convenient for them, they will choose that item. And I will say, no, I want to activate this space. Well, we only have these 4 options, and so I'm willing to give money to affordable housing. Well, that's great that you want to give money to affordable housing. However, we're in the middle of a crisis right now. So I'd rather you give me 20% of affordable housing and workforce versus putting money in a trust that's going to sit there for decades by the time we were able to get there. So I think it's a little tricky when we start doing these pieces, and this really needs to be thought out, because what it reminds me of is the option menu on a WU code and how it looks like on setbacks and who gets trees, who doesn't get trees, what the equity looks like, and then it was scattered and we're not uniformed. So I really want to put some thought with our colleagues to what does this really look like?
And Madam Chair, that is a great point. So as we bring this back for your consideration in the future, that could be something that we add into our recommendation. It is a 20% of workforce or affordable housing or a contribution to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and the council can help guide that direction. I think you make a great point on that, and not lower than 20% of workforce or affordable housing. It's a great direction.
Okay.
And as we met with the council and asked for your guidance on what was important to you for consideration, you'll see those items in front of you. One was historic preservation and being able to leverage this tool to cause historic buildings to be able to be kept. As an example, you did use a couple of years ago in the warehouse district, the gentleman that's under construction now with the Home 2 Suites was going to level the old Fuller warehouse. Instead of leveling the Fuller warehouse, the council did ask us to look at considering tools that we had to level the costs to the developer. And as happen would have it, as he looked at the building, as he looked at his efficiencies for his ramping and his parking, there was a variance of about $2 million that would be put upon him to restore this old warehouse instead of tearing it down, and the loss of efficiencies on the hotel. The GPLET benefit was just over $2 million. So council did authorize that, and if you drive by it today, the historic warehouse is under renovation. It will be the lobby of the hotel, and the hotel is building right next to it. The developer didn't get anything out of it other than the fund by which to be able to save that hotel. Another is in sustainability and climate and heat readiness, whether it's in solar, whether it is in water saving, whether it is in shade, our shade and tree master plan. Another we heard from a number of council members was the creation of additional public open space, making sure that we don't create concrete jungles that further exacerbate the heat island, that we have places for people to go out and be. Here in downtown Phoenix, of course, the continuation of creating the urban density that is called for in our general plan to enhance our transit options and to create more people living in this area. Of course, number one, affordable and workforce housing. The draw of urban retail that individuals want, if you were to bring in urban retail into the ground floors of the project. As we heard from CSL, the opportunity to create that entertainment district, to bring that kit of parts, that branding, that marketing, drawing those things together. Vice Mayor, you talked about Nashville and you feel like you could move on district to district to district. We don't have that here. And being able to add those nuances through the study that will be forthcoming on entertainment district. Of course, office, making sure we keep jobs in the city of Phoenix. We're not just creating residential options, but making sure jobs are here for our citizens, and public parking were options that all came out of our interviews with city council.
Chris?
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question on these considerations. What in particular is office? Because we did an inventory in the central business district that's saying that we are at the max of offices. So I know that that would be a possible consideration. However, if we're at that point, then that one should be off on the side, an alternate, and try to get the other pieces. But am I incorrect in my information?
Madam Chair, right now, because of the pandemic and the way that we've moved in with office, this is about a 13 million square foot office market here in downtown Phoenix. And our vacancy rate today is about 12 or 13% in our office rates down here. I think you're not incorrect in your information. I think what we'd like to hold it on the side, as you mentioned, is we would hate to give up all of the land sites in downtown Phoenix to residential, and then we have a beautiful new modern office building that would bring 3,000 or 4,000 jobs along with it to come, to not have a location for them to land. So I agree with you, kind of setting that off to the side and focusing on the other considerations, but just not taking it off the table, I think would be wise.
Okay, well, I get that. And then urban retail. I'm experiencing this in District 4 and the public space piece, where they get an incentive to do like an urban retail piece on the bottom floor, but that what ends up happening, it ends up being gym space. So that's another area I want to really concentrate and be very descriptive on what we are really looking for instead of leaving it so broad. There's could be some room for flexibility, but it gets a little tricky in trying to get all these incentives in order to get something built, and it's not what we told our constituents, and it's not what we told our community, and it's not what they expect. And so we need to be really mindful in this space. Same with the public open space. I understand there's several projects in downtown that were negotiated for public open space. But technically, it's not really public open space the way we're looking at it in the picture. It is just a connectivity space that you can maybe hang out there for a little bit, but you can't hang out there 24/7. And my question to that, because what I've been watching is that they have that bottom open space, but you can also shut down that open space. And they have the ability to do it. Meanwhile, they have received an incentive, and it is supposed to be open. So I really want to talk about that. What do we consider public open space?
Madam Chair, going in first order to second order, as we would write a policy moving forward, we absolutely, because we completely agree with you, activating the spaces, gym space is not what we share with the constituents when we go out. We could write a policy that would restrict that to exactly what we would want, which would be commercial, retail, restaurant, spaces that causes activation, spaces that causes gathering, that does not include a private gym for a high-density residential project. So I think to your point, the words we would use, we would want to follow that very closely, write a very tight language that would be considered, and then when we bring that back to council, should council choose to move forward with any GPLETs, actually have that as one of the items in the ordinance. So those aren't on any flexibility that staff or the developer might have in the future. It would be in the ordinance, and to change that, it would have to come back to the city council for your consideration. In the park space, we do agree with you also on that activation. It's supposed to be public open space. We could also add into a policy that it has to follow the hours of operation of our public parks. And so they couldn't just choose to close it down at 6 o'clock at night because that's something that they wanted to do without going through a process like we have with our public parks. If somebody rents one of our public parks, we can restrict it for a special event or restrict it for something because they've gone through a process with our parks department. So I think you make really great points to tighten this policy to ensure that it is what the constituents are thinking and what the council thinks that they are getting when we bring something forward.
So when you're saying public open space, you're talking parks?
Madam Chair, as you look at, let's use Patriot Park as an example. It is what is in Cityscape. It's where the pop-up fountain is. It's where the Christmas tree and the skating take place, and the restaurants are around it. That is owned by although it's owned by the city, it's managed by RED, but any changes that they want to make to that area have to go through our Parks Board, has to go through those items. We could also make it so that it would be city council that any changes would take place to go through, and put that in the ordinance as well.
Okay, because I guess where I'm in the public open space, what I'm thinking of the office right across if I stand on the 20th floor and look across the street, there's a development there. And part of the negotiation was the bottom floor, and that was considered open space. I don't consider that open space, because after 8 years with their incentive, it can change, it could get closed down, and it's no longer an open space. So that's why I'm trying to figure out these nuances, because I've learned through over time in this world of GPLETs of what is considered or how we write it. And because it's written that way, sometimes staff is in a situation where, well, this is the way it's written, da-da-da-da. So this is just me learning and have learned and have seen the benefits and have seen people not using that space, not realizing it's open space for them. So that's how I'm thinking.
Madam Chair, that is great guidance to us. I know now I see exactly what you're saying. So I think we could work on a policy that would, where we could even go farther to make sure that they have to market the space as open space, that there's signage that shows it's open space, and maybe it doesn't end at the end of the 8 years when the tool ends, or at the end of the 25 years if we're in another area of the city, where it is a negotiated program that we have that keeps that ground floor space activated. So I think you've explained it to us very well, and I think we could come back with some language for your consideration.
Is there anybody else that has any questions? Go ahead.
I think as far as open space, maybe we can try to refine and provide a definition that we can use when we're working with the development community. And I'm not necessarily opposed to open space being closed to a certain area. When I was in Houston, Levi Park is actually a private park, but it serves every development around it, and they have to maintain it. They have to take care of it. They have to provide for private security, things like that. So if we have some definition, maybe that will help us, and then we can also look as the GPLET closes down, how we use that in the future. So I think a good idea would be try to better refine or define.
Madam Chair, Councilman Stark, you could even bring in something that was a public access easement so that it is a deed that runs with the land, and anybody who buys it in the future knows that that easement exists.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair, as we look at alternative public benefit options, two of the things that we did hear from the council was a potential contribution to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Staff has been working on some formulas for this committee, to the subcommittee to consider, and we'll bring those back to you. We'll brief you as we move forward on those considerations and what they could be. And the second was there are some council districts that have shared with me that they're really what they need are other things. They don't need more affordable housing, more workforce housing. They already have a preponderance of that in their area, and what they would like is market rate housing to be able to help advance the desires of the community. The community wants a Whole Foods, they want a Trader Joe's, they want a Target City, they want but their densities just aren't there, their household incomes just aren't there. So us leveraging that tool to cause those household incomes and densities to get where the rest of the community wants them to get, but in that instance, that could be where a new fund for that additional public benefit, and Vice Mayor and Councilman Stark, you provided us some guidance on that earlier you'd want to make sure that how that's used and that it's guided by the council, that it's not this menu where the developer can say, I've got 4 things, I'm going to pick this one because it's the easiest, where it would be something else.
Yeah, and just as a follow-up, again, I think this is great. I like the idea of having these alternative public benefit options, but I also agree with the Vice Mayor. There may be those times where we need to ask for 20-30% affordable housing. I think about Sunny Slope. I met with the Washington Elementary School District the other day, and they're in a crisis with regards to their teachers, and they want to try to find them affordable housing within the elementary district. And so in that case, I look at target area F, which is the Sunny Slope area. Perhaps at that point, if someone came in with a GPLET, I think maybe it might be more important to say, while you build your multifamily, we'd like you to set aside 30%. And I wouldn't be as concerned with the financial options, because there might be a more immediate need. So if we still have that flexibility, I think this is a great start.
Madam Chair, Councilman Stark, as we bring a policy back to you, we will make sure there is an either or of the 20% or greater of workforce affordable housing, or a contribution, and the council the council of the district will really say, this is what I'd like it to be.
Yes, because I'm in the middle of that. dialogue right now, and their option is wanting to put money somewhere, and I'm saying, no, I need 20% of workforce now. Why can't we do this? And and because we gave them the two options, they're choosing that option. And so I think we need to be very careful because we know what we want in the demands of the community right now. And so I think that's a bigger dialogue, but I'm the councilwoman of that area, so I'm saying I'm not choosing that option. But it puts also me and our council colleagues in a position where, in a very awkward position to say no when we always want to be nice.
Madam Chair, we can be your bullies for you.
All right. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We will be bringing this item back and have done some research in the options, right? Okay. Thank you. Nick Wood is, I'm sorry, I have to keep you here. Nick Wood is on the phone. I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Nick Wood, 1 East Washington Street, Cityscape, Phoenix. I just want to make a few comments with your permission, Madam Chair. I represent, the owners of Union Station, the developers of Milam Textiles, the owner of 1 West Madison, Richmond Capital, which is a affordable housing and workforce housing developer, as well as the developer of Astra. And I very much appreciate the comments that were made by both Chris and Zandon. As the market evolves, your policy making evolves with it. Using 426203D, as in David, allows us really to help encourage the development of workforce and affordable housing. A standalone project outside of downtown, for example. We can create redevelopment areas anywhere that you deem appropriate. And of course, there's a process to do that. We did it at Metro Center a number of years ago for Councilwoman Williams. Historic preservation is critically important. You heard what we did with the Home 2 at Hilton in the warehouse district. And of course, doing adaptive reuse is extremely expensive to do. And then finally, when you're doing major projects like Astra at 1.7 million square feet with the tallest building, what would be the tallest building in Arizona, those costs are extremely significant when you're including hotels and co-living and office and retail, as well as conventional residential. Madam Chair, as you mentioned, the menu, I agree that we don't want to go back to what we had before. Back in 2019 was the last GPLET we did. And as you know, I've done a few in downtown. And having, a better direction is very helpful to me as I give advice to my clients. So with that, Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to comment on this, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Anybody have any questions? Yes, no, Chris? No?
No,
Thank you, Mr. Wood. I appreciate it. Okay, now I can end it. Do we have any public comments? Future agenda items? Adjourn.
In Arizona, 150,000 people have been diagnosed